Growing up, I have always been a huge Dragon Ball fan. I remember buying a Fusion Reborn and Wrath of the Dragon Steelbook for $5 at the mall one day and watching those two movies every weekend. At the time, no TV channels were playing Dragon Ball until it eventually came back as Dragon Ball Z Kai, and this only made me fall further in love with the series. I still remember hearing my friends at school talk about how cool the new Raging Blast was and how badly I wanted to get my hands on a Dragon Ball game. Luckily, I didn't have to wait long because one day I happened to stumble upon this game at GameStop and it was only $5. Luckily for me, I had just enough from my allowance to pick it up and take it home with me. That game was The Legacy of Goku 2. When you think of iconic Dragon Ball games, what comes to mind? I'm sure some of you are saying the Budokai series, Budokai Tenkaichi, Raging Blast, Xenoverse, even Dokkan Battle and Legends. But how many of you thought about The Legacy of Goku? More specifically, The Legacy of Goku 2. This game released in June of 2003. This game was something that defined my childhood. It's one of the few games I owned at the time and one that I 100% more than once. The game picks up right after the end of the first one, but don't even bother playing the first one, trust me, there's a reason this video is on the second game and not the first. But where exactly did the first game end off on? Well, the first game covered the first two arcs of Dragon Ball Z, the Saiyan saga and the Frieza saga, with the Legacy of Goku 2 picking up at the beginning of the Android saga. However, rather than picking up with Trunks' arrival, the game decides to start things off in the future and incorporate some of the things from the Future Trunks special. And this is where we get our tutorial. This introduction is set up so nicely. Rather than just outright telling you, hey, press the A button for melee attacks and B for your special, the game puts you in a natural setting that makes sense. Future Gohan training Trunks. And this introduction gets you familiarized with the gameplay while setting up the main plot of the game. This game also introduced more playable characters. The original game had you follow the story from Goku's perspective. I mean, the title is The Legacy of Goku, but the issue with that is that you miss out on a lot of key moments like the Z Fighters vs Nappa and Krillin and Gohan's time on Namek. The second game has 5 main characters and even a fun secret one at the end. And although they tend to play the same, it gave the game so much more additional content. You'll constantly be switching back and forth between the characters, engaging in their iconic moments from the anime. Although the grinding you have to do in this game does get repetitive real quick. You see, you can't just keep progressing through the story. As you keep pushing through the main quest, you will be stopped by level doors which require a certain character to be at that level. The first game had this as well, but the Legacy of Goku 2 was designed so much better. I noticed that it still had you do a bit of grinding to unlock certain doors, but it wasn't nearly as bad as the original. When I first played this game, I was playing it alongside the weekly release of Dragon Ball Z Kai on Nicktoons, and this was such a peak experience because there is no other Dragon Ball game that goes super in depth like the Legacy of Goku 2, well, at least at the time. For example, Budokai Tenkaichi 3, a top 5 Dragon Ball game in my opinion, and its story mode just goes over the fights, not the dialogue in between, the mysteries, or the character development. The Legacy of Goku 2 is one of the only examples that pretty much translates the manga into a video game, keeping all of its dialogue intact and the same pacing that's used in the manga. There are some minor tweaks to the story, but the premise and tone are the same, and I feel like this is such an important aspect, especially for the Cell Saga. One of the things that had me glued to my TV screen was the mystery of Cell. Seeing Trunks and Gohan find the second time machine and start putting the puzzle pieces together was so fascinating, and this is an aspect that isn't covered by other Dragon Ball games, except this one. On top of that, this game has some phenomenal music running in the background. I kid you not, I literally play some of these tracks at the gym when I'm trying to switch things up from my normal music routine. The soundtrack is just that good, especially the Perfect Cell track, like literally just listen. The soundtracks and the dialogue of this game just glued me in, and it's a weird feeling because it almost feels like you're reading the manga, but with the Bruce Falconer inspired music in the background. Well, when I say it follows the manga, take that with a grain of salt because if it was a 100% manga accurate representation, then the game would be much shorter. The Legacy of Goku 2 still hits all the major plot points but adds side quests to the main quest to pad out the game. I have some mixed feelings about this because it does add a lot of content to the game, but having them be a requirement to progress does get annoying at times. If you have played this game before, I'm sure you can remember the quest where you have to escort dinosaur eggs to a safe location without dropping them. This seems easy on paper, but if you get hit, you have to walk all the way back to grab another egg. I still remember rage quitting about this quest so many times when I was younger. But on the other hand, there are some quests that are genuinely really good and add a lot of world building and character development, like when you have to rescue lost children in a bus crash, or the random dinosaur fight that you have with Piccolo. The game is also somewhat open world, which isn't crazy by today's standards, but when you consider the fact that this is a Game Boy Advance game that released in 2003, it's impressive. The game has a few different environments and a 3D overworld map that you can fly around to access them. That 3D overworld might not seem like much, but as a kid, I absolutely loved this. The fact that you could fly from West City to Kame House and the other environments was so cool because I always knew these areas were far apart in the real world of Dragon Ball, but seeing them on a map made this feel that much more real. And I know this isn't really anything crazy, I mean Budokai 3 did this as well, but this is a Game Boy Advance game, and that to me is just the crazy part. Another cool little detail is how the game even tells you why there are so many hostile enemies. If you watched the anime and you didn't skip over the Garlic Jr. filler arc, you would know that he used black mist to put people in a sort of trance and control them. And this is the same reason why enemies are hostile. The developers didn't have to add this little detail as it doesn't add anything to the story, but it's a nice little touch that gives an explanation as to why things are the way that they are. But none of this really matters if the gameplay sucks. Which, spoiler alert, it doesn't. The gameplay is pretty simple, it behaves like a typical beat 'em up. You don't have a lot of different combat options, but the gameplay is still fun. You have your basic melee attacks, which if you use your dash and a melee, you'll do a stronger attack. Then you have your special key based attacks like the Kamehameha, Masenko, special beam cannon, and regular ki blast. Despite the moveset being so simple, the gameplay is still really fun and enjoyable, and has some really difficult fights that punish you if you play recklessly. On top of that, this game has some of the best use of Super Saiyan I've seen in any Dragon Ball game. For example, look at Sparking Zero, Budokai 3, and Fighters. All those games just give you a different moveset when you're in Super Saiyan and a different look to your character. Sure, you might have a slight, and I mean very slight damage boost, but the form is balanced so that it isn't broken when facing other players. The Legacy of Goku doesn't have this requirements and makes Super Saiyan transformations actually feel super. Just like the anime and manga, Super Saiyan drains your stamina while giving you a boost to your speed and power. Not a tiny boost like the balanced Sparking Zero and Fighters, but a noticeable jump in power like it's supposed to be. This really helps melt the bosses that you fight throughout the game, which leads me into the next segment. I felt that the bosses were a tad weak in this game. Still enjoyable, but all the major bosses play very similarly. You can just rush them and spam your melee attacks, and as long as you keep hitting them, they don't really have a chance to counter and hit back. But when they do hit back, they hit back hard, especially the last fight against Cell. By far, my second favorite thing about this game has to be its bosses. Like I said, they are pretty much punching bags until you miss an attack and they get a chance to hit back, but despite them playing out so simple, there was something really fun about them. Other Dragon Ball games had you blitz through the story, going from the Saiyan arrival to the end of the Buu arc in sometimes less than an hour. I played a lot of Budokai 3 and Budokai Tenkaichi 3 growing up, and I would just rush from fight to fight, but the Legacy of Goku forced you to slow down and engage throughout the whole arc. Even little moments that I haven't seen in other Dragon Ball games, like Krillin and Trunks finding Jiro's underground lab and destroying Cell's embryo, were necessary stops in the story. So despite the boss fights playing rather simple, the story and build-up made them feel more meaningful. So I said this was my second favorite part about the game, so what is the first? And to me, it's the dialogue. The fact that this game plays almost like a visual novel with some action elements incorporated. Besides Dragon Ball Kakarot, I haven't seen any game go this in depth into the story and include little details that might seem so insignificant to some. At the start of the video, I mentioned how I 100% the game a number of times, so you're probably wondering what that even means and what you get by doing this. Well, to truly 100% the game, you have to complete all of the side quests and get all of the playable characters to level 50. One of those side quests is finding all of the lost Namekians, and when you complete this, you get a chance to fly over to New Namek and fight Cooler, which is such a cool little Easter egg. Once you beat the game, Goku says his goodbyes and you'll unlock a statue of him in Capsule Corp. To get the rest of the statues, you need to bring every character to level 50 and break open their respective doors. This will unlock their statue, and once that is completed, you unlock a secret character, Mr. Satan. Which, just like in the series, he isn't very strong, well, when you compare him to the rest of the Sea Fighters. But he does have a very busted ability that lets you freeze time for a couple of seconds. If you get him to level 50, you get the chance to use him in the World Tournament postgame. I'm just kidding. You don't get anything for leveling up to level 50, but me being the naive kid without internet access thought I was missing something. Regardless though, being able to play as Hercule was fun, even though grinding him up had literally no purpose. Although, unlocking Hercule does give you a chance to see this secret ending where he reveals to the world that he was actually the one who took out Cell. If you haven't played this game yet and are looking for a different type of Dragon Ball experience, then I highly suggest you give this game a shot. It's not your typical fighting game, and in my opinion, it's a really cool way to relive one of the best arcs in all of Dragon Ball. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.